I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd replace lubricant with industrial glue. But then again, I never thought my wife of 42 years would be the kind of woman who needed a tube of it hidden under her passenger seat. I found it on a Tuesday afternoon while vacuuming her Honda, tucked beside an old receipt and a lipstick shade she never wore around me. My hands didn't shake when I picked it up. They should have. Instead, I just stood there in our driveway, holding this small plastic tube like it was evidence in a trial I didn't know I was part of. What do you do when the person you've trusted your entire adult life suddenly becomes a stranger? I didn't confront her. Not that day, not the next. I went to the hardware store instead, bought a tube of industrial-grade adhesive, the kind that bonds metal to concrete, and carefully emptied out the original lubricant, replacing it with the glue. Same weight, same squeeze resistance. I put it back exactly where I found it, under the seat, next to that receipt dated 3 weeks ago from a restaurant we'd never been to together. Then I went inside, made dinner, and asked Margaret about her day like I had every evening for 4 decades. She smiled at me the way she always did, that soft crinkle around her eyes, and told me about the book club meeting. I nodded. I listened. I said nothing. The waiting was the hardest part. Not knowing when she'd use it, not knowing with who. I kept my routine exactly the same. Morning coffee at 6, crossword puzzle, tending the tomato plants out back. Margaret kept hers too. Yoga on Mondays, grocery shopping Wednesdays, book club Fridays. Except now I noticed the little things. The way she checked her phone and angled it away from me. The new perfume. The fact that she started closing the bathroom door when she used to leave it open. Small changes. The kind that add up when you're looking for them. Before I go further, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. It was a Thursday when everything unraveled. I was in the garage organizing my toolbox when I heard her car start. I glanced at the clock, 2:15 in the afternoon. No book club, no yoga, no groceries. Just Margaret, backing out of the driveway in her Honda, wearing that lipstick I'd found under the seat. I watched through the garage window as she turned left instead of right, away from town, toward the old industrial district where nobody goes unless they're meeting someone they don't want seen. I didn't follow her. I already knew enough. Instead, I sat on my workbench and waited. The tomatoes needed watering. The grass needed mowing. Life needed living. But all I could do was sit there and imagine what was about to happen. The tube was still under her seat. I checked that morning while she was in the shower. She hadn't used it yet. Or maybe she had. Maybe she'd already replaced it with a new one and I was the fool sitting in his garage, thinking he'd outsmarted a woman who'd been outsmarting him for God knows how long. 3 hours passed. The sun started its descent behind the Hendersons' roof across the street. I heard her car before I saw it. That slight rattle in the exhaust I kept meaning to fix but never did. She pulled into the driveway slowly, carefully, like she was carrying something fragile, or hiding something broken. The engine cut. The door opened. But she didn't get out. She just sat there in the driver's seat staring straight ahead through the windshield at our closed garage door. I walked to the kitchen window and watched. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel. Even from 30 feet away I could see her knuckles were white. Her head dropped forward, resting against the wheel. Her shoulders started shaking. At first I thought she was crying. Then I realized she was laughing. A silent, body-shaking laugh that looked more like sobbing. What had happened in that car? What had she tried to do? What had gone wrong? Or right, depending on how you looked at it. She finally got out. Smoothed her blouse. Checked her reflection in the side mirror. Reapplied that lipstick with a steady hand. Then she walked toward the house like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just spent 3 hours God knows where doing God knows what. I met her at the door. Asked if she had a nice drive. She looked me straight in the eye and said she'd just been visiting an old friend from college who'd moved to Riverside. A woman named Patricia I'd never heard of in 42 years of marriage. She smiled that same soft smile. I smiled back. That night she took a long shower. Longer than usual. I heard the water running for almost an hour. When she came to bed, she smelled like lavender soap and something else. Something chemical and sharp that I couldn't place. She kissed my cheek and told me she loved me. I told her I loved her too. We'd said those words thousands of times. I wondered how many of them had been true. I wondered how many of mine still were. I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe beside me, steady and calm like someone with nothing to hide. Around 3 in the morning, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times. Text messages. She didn't wake up. Or maybe she did and just pretended not to. I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't need to. I already knew what they probably said. What I didn't know yet was what had happened in that car. Whether my little replacement had done its job. Whether someone somewhere was dealing with a very uncomfortable situation that industrial adhesive tends to create. The answer came the next morning. I was making scrambled eggs when Margaret's phone rang. She answered it in the bedroom, door closed, voice low. But our house is old, and the walls are thin, and I heard enough. Heard her say, I don't know what happened, and it won't come off, and maybe we should just stop. When she came out, her face was pale. She looked at me differently, not with suspicion, with something else. Fear, maybe, or respect. Like she was seeing me for the first time and realizing she'd underestimated the quiet man who did crossword puzzles and grew tomatoes. Do you think she knew it was me? Could she have figured it out that quickly? She didn't go anywhere that day, or the next. She stayed home, stayed close, watched me with those careful eyes. I tended my garden, fixed the exhaust rattle on her car, made dinner, said nothing. The tube of industrial glue remained under her seat. I checked. She hadn't thrown it away, hadn't replaced it, just left it there like evidence neither of us was ready to acknowledge. We were in a stalemate. A quiet war fought over scrambled eggs and crossword puzzles, where the weapons were silence and knowing looks and tubes of adhesive hidden under car seats. Then, 6 days after the Thursday drive, the ambulance came. The siren started at 4 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I was deadheading roses by the fence when I heard them getting closer, that urgent wail cutting through our quiet neighborhood like a knife through butter. They stopped 3 houses down at the Mitchell's place. Stan Mitchell, 63 years old, retired accountant, drives a silver Lexus, goes jogging every morning at 6:30, and apparently, according to the paramedics loading him onto a stretcher, suffering from a medical emergency that required 3 EMTs and a very discreet white sheet covering his lower half. I didn't need to ask what happened. I already knew. The industrial glue I'd carefully transferred into that tube wasn't meant for skin-to-skin contact. The warning label had been very clear about that. Bonds in seconds. Requires medical-grade solvents to separate. May cause severe tissue damage. I'd read it twice before making my purchase. 3 times before making my replacement. Stan Mitchell was learning those warnings the hard way, and judging by the way his wife Carol was screaming at him from their front porch, she wasn't particularly sympathetic to his predicament. Margaret stood beside me at the fence watching the scene unfold with a face like carved marble. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Her fingers gripped the fence post so hard I could see the tendons standing out on the back of her hand. She knew. Of course she knew. Stan Mitchell, who'd helped us move our couch last spring, who brought us tomatoes from his garden, who'd been screwing my wife in her Honda while his wife thought he was at the gym. The math wasn't difficult. The tube under Margaret's seat, Stan 3 houses down, the ambulance, the screaming wife, the white sheet. That's terrible, Margaret finally said, her voice flat and hollow. I wonder what happened to him. I kept pruning my roses, careful with the shears. Hard to say. Medical emergencies come out of nowhere sometimes. 1 minute you're fine. The next you're bonded to something you shouldn't be bonded to. She turned to look at me then. Really look at me. Her eyes were wide and wet, but no tears fell. We stood there facing each other across 4 decades of marriage and 1 week of silent warfare. the ambulance lights still flashing red and blue across our faces. I could see her doing the calculations, wondering if I knew, wondering how much I knew, wondering what kind of man she'd been sleeping next to all these years while she was sleeping with Stan Mitchell 3 houses down. "William," she whispered. Just my name. Nothing else. But it contained everything: confession, question, fear, and something that might have been respect or might have been terror. I couldn't tell anymore. I went back to my roses, snipped a dead bloom and let it fall into my collection bucket. "Dinner's at 6. I'm making that chicken recipe you like, the one with rosemary." She stood there for another moment, then walked back inside. I heard the screen door close softly behind her. Across the street, Carol Mitchell was following the ambulance to her car, still screaming, still crying, still discovering that her marriage had been a lie. I felt sorry for her. Not sorry enough to warn her beforehand, but sorry nonetheless. Some truths need to arrive with sirens and white sheets. Some truths need to hurt before they can heal. The neighborhood spent the next 3 days buzzing with rumors. Stan Mitchell had suffered a severe allergic reaction. Stan Mitchell had a bizarre accident with superglue. Stan Mitchell had been with another woman when it happened. That last one was closest to the truth, but nobody seemed to know who the woman was. Carol Mitchell wasn't talking, probably too humiliated. Stan Mitchell was still in the hospital, probably still being separated from whatever, or whoever, he'd gotten bonded to. And Margaret was home, quiet, cooking dinners and folding laundry and not going anywhere at all. What would you have done if you'd discovered what I discovered? On Saturday morning, Margaret finally broke. I was having my coffee and doing the crossword when she sat down across from me at the kitchen table. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face blotchy. She folded her hands in front of her like she was praying. Maybe she was. "I need to tell you something," she said. I kept my pen hovering over the puzzle. 7 across. 5 letters. Betrayal's opposite. I couldn't think of the answer. "I've been seeing Stan Mitchell," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "For 6 months. It started after his retirement party. We ran into each other at the grocery store and started talking, and it just happened. I never meant for it to. I never wanted to hurt you." I filled in 7 across. Loyalty. Perfect fit. "Did you hear me?" Her voice cracked. "I said I've been having an affair with Stan Mitchell." "I heard you." I moved to 12 down. "Question is, why are you telling me now? Why not last week? Why not 6 months ago?" She stared at her hands. "Because he's in the hospital. Because his wife knows. Because the tube that was in my car." She couldn't finish, couldn't say it out loud. That she'd given Stan Mitchell the tube. That they'd tried to use it. That whatever they'd attempted in her Honda or his Lexus or wherever they'd been meeting had gone catastrophically wrong when the lubricant turned out to be industrial adhesive. "Because you finally got caught," I said quietly, setting down my pen. "Not because you felt guilty. Not because you wanted to make things right. Because Stan Mitchell is in the hospital with his penis glued to God knows what, and you're terrified I'll connect the dots." The color drained from her face. You know about the tube?" "Margaret, I'm the one who replaced it." I said it calmly, like I was commenting on the weather or the state of the tomatoes. Just a simple fact. No rage, no shouting, just the truth. Laid out between us like the crossword puzzle on the table. She made a sound I'd never heard her make before. Something between a gasp and a sob and a laugh. Her hands flew to her mouth. Her whole body started shaking. You did that on purpose? You knew I was... And you... William, that's insane. That's criminal. You could have killed him." "But I didn't." I picked up my pen again. "I just made sure that whatever you two were planning to do in that car became a memorable experience. Seems it worked. Stan got a trip to the hospital. You got a wake-up call. Carol got the truth. Everybody got something. She was crying now, really crying, tears streaming down her face. How long have you known? Long enough. I didn't tell her about finding the tube, didn't tell her about the receipt or the lipstick, or the 3-hour drive to Riverside, some cards you keep close. Long enough to decide whether I wanted to save this marriage or watch it burn. Long enough to realize that sometimes the person you love most is the person you know least. Margaret pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loud against the tile. She walked to the window, wrapped her arms around herself, stared out at the street where the ambulance had been 3 days ago. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, older. What happens now? I considered the question. 12 down was still empty. Understanding's foundation. 4 letters. I knew the answer, but I didn't write it yet. Instead, I stood up, walked to where she stood, and looked out the window with her. Our neighborhood looked exactly the same as it had yesterday and the day before, and the day 42 years ago when we'd first moved in. Same houses, same trees, same mailboxes. But everything was different now. Everything had changed. Now, I said slowly, you decide if 6 months with Stan Mitchell was worth 42 years with me, and I decide if 42 years with you is worth forgiving 6 months with him, and we both live with whatever we choose. She turned to face me, mascara running down her cheeks. Can you forgive me? I didn't answer right away. 12 down. Understanding's foundation. 4 letters. Trust. I'd known it all along. The question was whether we could rebuild it. Whether trust once shattered like industrial glue shattering someone's dignity could ever be put back together. I don't know yet, I finally said. It was the most honest answer I had. That night Margaret slept in the guest room. Her choice, not mine. I lay in our bed alone, listening to the house settle, thinking about tubes and lies and ambulances and roses that needed deadheading. My phone buzzed around midnight, a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Carol Mitchell. We need to talk. I met Carol Mitchell at the diner on Route 9, the one that sits between our town and the next, where nobody we knew would see us together. She was already in a corner booth when I arrived, nursing a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Neither had I. We matched that way, 2 people destroyed by the same betrayal, sitting across from each other in a vinyl booth under fluorescent lights that made everyone look half dead. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Soon as I slid into the seat, she pushed a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photographs. Margaret and Stan, the grocery store parking lot, a motel off Highway 47. Stan's Lexus parked behind the abandoned lumberyard. Carol had been following him for weeks, documenting everything with the careful precision of someone who knew exactly what she'd find and needed proof anyway. I hired a private investigator 2 months ago, Carol said, her voice steady despite the tears collecting in the corners of her eyes. Stan got sloppy, started coming home smelling like her perfume, started working out at odd hours. I knew something was wrong, but I needed evidence before I confronted him. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I didn't need to confront him at all. Someone else did that for me. I studied the photographs without touching them. Margaret getting into Stan's car, Stan's hand on Margaret's lower back, the 2 of them walking into that motel, bodies angled toward each other like magnets. Evidence of everything I'd suspected but hadn't wanted confirmed. Seeing it in glossy 8x10 prints made it real in a way that finding a tube of lubricant never had. The hospital wouldn't tell me details, Carol continued, wrapping both hands around her coffee mug like she was trying to draw warmth from stone. Patient privacy laws. But Stan finally admitted what happened. He said they were in your wife's car, parked at that lumberyard, and when they tried to use the lubricant, something went terribly wrong. It bonded his skin, required surgery to separate him from... She trailed off, her face flushing. They had to remove skin grafts. He'll have scarring, permanent damage. I should have felt guilty. Maybe I would later. Right then, all I felt was tired. tired of lies and secrets and marriages that looked perfect from the outside while rotting from within. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," I said, and meant it. Carol's eyes snapped up to meet mine, sharp and searching. "Are you?" "Because my investigator told me something interesting. He said he saw you at Morrison's hardware store 3 weeks ago. Saw you purchase industrial-grade adhesive, medical-grade bonding strength. The same type the hospital identified when they were treating Stan." She leaned forward. "You knew about them. You found out somehow and you set a trap. Didn't you, William?" The diner was nearly empty. Just us and a trucker at the counter and a waitress refilling salt shakers. Nobody was paying attention to the 2 gray-haired people having a quiet conversation in the corner booth. Nobody knew this was a confession taking place over cold coffee and untouched pie. "Yes," I said simply. No point denying it. Carol deserved the truth more than most people. "I found the tube under Margaret's seat, replaced the contents. I didn't know it was Stan specifically. Could have been anyone. But I knew someone was going to have a very bad day eventually." Carol sat back, processing. I waited for anger, for threats, for her to pull out her phone and call the police. Instead, she smiled. Actually smiled. It was small and sad and completely humorless, but it was a smile. "Good," she said quietly. "I'm glad you did it. I'm glad he suffered. Does that make me a terrible person?" "If it does, then we're both terrible." I flagged down the waitress, ordered coffee I didn't want just to have something to do with my hands. "What happens now? You going to divorce him?" "Already filed the papers. 40 years of marriage, 3 children, 2 grandchildren, and it ends because he couldn't keep his pants zipped." She pushed the photographs back into the envelope. "My lawyer says I'll get the house, half his pension, probably the Lexus too once the judge hears about the affair. Stan will get visitation rights with the grandkids and a studio apartment in the bad part of town. Fair trade, I think." I thought about Margaret sleeping in our guest room. About 42 years that might end the same way Carol's were ending. About trust that was spelled with 4 letters but took a lifetime to build and a moment to shatter. Margaret told me yesterday, confessed everything. And I don't know yet. It was becoming my standard answer, the only honest one I had. Part of me wants to forgive her. 42 years should count for something. But another part can't stop seeing those pictures, can't stop imagining her with him, can't stop wondering how many times she kissed me after being with him. "Do you think some betrayals are too big to forgive?" Carol nodded like she understood completely. Maybe she did. Maybe we were the only 2 people in the world who could understand this particular flavor of pain. "The investigator found something else," she said, pulling a small notebook from her purse. "Text messages. He recovered them from Stan's phone before Stan thought to delete everything. Want to know what your wife said to my husband?" I didn't, and I did. The human condition in a nutshell, desperately wanting to know the truth while simultaneously dreading it. "Tell me." She opened the notebook, found a page marked with a pink sticky note, and read in a flat monotone. "April 16th, Margaret to Stan. He's doing the crossword. Doesn't suspect a thing. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember how alive you make me feel. April 23rd. Told him I was at book club. Spent 3 hours with you instead. Best book club ever. May 2nd. Do you think we'll ever get caught? What would we do if we did?" Carol looked up. "Want me to keep going? There are hundreds." "No." My coffee arrived. I wrapped my hands around the mug the same way Carol had, seeking warmth that wouldn't come. "I get the picture." We sat in silence for a while. The trucker left. The waitress disappeared into the kitchen. Outside the window, cars passed on Route 9, people heading to lives that probably had their own secrets and lies and tubes of lubricant hidden under seats. The world kept turning regardless of our small disasters. "I came here to thank you," Carol finally said, "for exposing them, for making sure Stan suffered consequences. The hospital bills aren't covered by insurance. Elective sexual activity resulting in injury. He'll be paying those off for years. He lost his golf buddies when word got around, lost his dignity, lost me. All because you replaced some lubricant with glue. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. So thank you, William. You gave me the exit I needed but was too scared to take on my own. I squeezed back. Her hands were cold and small and trembling slightly. What will you do now? My sister lives in Arizona. She's been asking me to visit for years. I think I'll go. Maybe stay. Start over somewhere the mailman doesn't know my husband glued his penis to his mistress. She laughed, and this time it sounded almost genuine. What about you? Haven't decided yet. I released her hand, reached for my wallet. Margaret's still in the guest room. We haven't really talked since her confession. I'm not sure what there is to say. Say nothing. Carol stood, gathering her purse and envelope. Let her sit with the silence. Let her wonder if you'll stay or go. Let her feel a fraction of the uncertainty and fear she put you through. Don't give her closure until you're ready. Maybe not even then. She left 2 20s on the table for coffee that cost $6, then walked out into the afternoon sun. I watched her car pull onto Route 9 and disappear toward Arizona, or wherever people went when their marriages exploded. Then I sat alone in the booth, drinking bad coffee and thinking about silence and revenge and whether industrial glue was the worst thing I'd ever done or the best. My phone buzzed. Margaret. Where are you? We need to talk, I typed back. Having coffee. Be home when I'm ready. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Okay. I ordered pie I wouldn't eat and sat in that booth until the sun started setting. The waitress asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, just thinking. She refilled my coffee and left me alone with my thoughts and the photographs Carol had left behind on the table. Evidence of betrayal in glossy 8x10 prints. Evidence that sometimes the quiet man with the crossword puzzle in the tomato garden sees more than anyone gives him credit for. When I finally went home, Margaret was sitting at the kitchen table where I'd left her that morning. Same chair, same position. Like she'd been waiting all day for me to return and tell her whether our marriage would survive. I walked past her without a word, went out to the garden, and deadheaded the roses until dark. She watched me from the window. I felt her eyes on my back the whole time, heavy and desperate and full of questions I wasn't ready to answer. That night, I slept in our bed. She stayed in the guest room. The house had never felt bigger or more empty. Somewhere 3 houses down, Stan Mitchell was probably sleeping alone, too, healing from surgery and divorce papers and the consequences of believing he wouldn't get caught. Somewhere on Route 9, Carol was driving toward Arizona and a future that didn't include him. And somewhere in our guest room, Margaret was learning what I'd learned weeks ago, that silence can be louder than screaming, and waiting for forgiveness is harder than asking for it. 2 weeks passed in that terrible silence. Margaret stopped trying to talk to me after the 5th day. She'd make breakfast, leave it on the table, disappear into the guest room. I'd eat alone, do my crossword, tend the garden. We moved through the house like ghosts haunting the same space, never quite touching, never quite speaking. The neighbors probably thought everything was fine. That's the thing about betrayal. It's so easy to hide behind mowed lawns and waved hellos in cars that leave the driveway on schedule. Stan Mitchell came home from the hospital on day 9. I watched from my tomato plants as Carol loaded suitcases into her sedan, 3 carloads worth, while Stan stood on the porch looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Diminished. She didn't look at him once during the whole process. Just loaded her life into her car and drove away toward Arizona, and a sister who'd welcome her, and a future that didn't include medical bills from industrial adhesive incidents. Stan went back inside his empty house and didn't come out for 3 days. On day 12, I found Margaret in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. She was sitting in the dark, holding the tube of industrial glue I'd left under her car seat. She'd finally retrieved it, finally examined it, finally understood the deliberateness of what I'd done. "You could have killed him," she said without looking up. "If it had bonded differently, if they'd panicked, you could have killed someone." I poured myself water from the tap, leaned against the counter. But I didn't, just taught a lesson. Sometimes lessons hurt. Is that what this is? A lesson? She turned the tube over in her hands, reading the warning label I'd read 3 times before making my purchase. Or is it revenge? Can't it be both? I set down my glass. You took 42 years of trust and threw it away for 6 months of feeling alive. Stan took 40 years from Carol for the same reason. Someone needed to pay the price. Turned out that someone was him. She finally looked at me, her face pale in the darkness. And what about me? What's my price? That was the question, wasn't it? The one I'd been asking myself for 2 weeks while we haunted our house like strangers. What was Margaret's price for betrayal? What was my price for staying? What was the cost of forgiveness versus the cost of divorce? Your price, I said slowly, is living with the knowledge that the man you married for 42 years became someone you didn't recognize, someone capable of replacing lubricant with industrial glue, someone who could smile and make dinner and tend tomatoes while planning revenge. You thought you knew me, Margaret. Turns out you didn't. That's your price. Realizing you've been sleeping next to a stranger. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That's not fair. You became that person because of what I did. You weren't like this before. Wasn't I? I moved to the window, looked out at our dark street. Or maybe I was always capable of it and you just never gave me a reason. Maybe quiet men who do crosswords and grow tomatoes have depths you never bothered to explore. Maybe you mistook patience for weakness and silence for ignorance. The tube of glue hit the kitchen table with a hollow sound. So what now, William? We can't keep living like this. Separate rooms, no talking, just ghosts in a house that used to be a home. Something has to give. She was right. Something did. I'd known it for days but hadn't been ready to say it out loud. Saying it made it real, made it permanent, changed everything in ways that couldn't be unchanged. But the silence was killing us slower than the truth would, and at least the truth was honest. I want you to leave, I said to the window, to the darkness, to the ghost of the woman I'd married. Not forever, just for a while. Go stay with your sister in Portland. Take a month, maybe 2. Give us both space to figure out if there's anything left worth saving. Behind me, I heard her sharp intake of breath. You're kicking me out? I'm giving us both room to breathe. I turned to face her. Every time I look at you, I see Stan Mitchell. See you in his car. See you lying to me about book clubs and old friends from college. I can't heal from that while you're sleeping down the hall. Can't figure out forgiveness while you're making me breakfast I don't eat. So go. Take time. Decide if 6 months with him was worth losing 42 years with me. And I'll decide if 42 years with you is worth forgiving 6 months with him. Margaret stood slowly, like her bones hurt. Maybe they did. Betrayal ages people in ways that time alone can't. And if I don't want to go, then I will. Simple as that. Someone needs to leave this house so we can both think clearly. I'm giving you the choice of who. She stared at me for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for 4 decades. This stranger who'd hidden tubes under car seats and lipstick in glove compartments. Then she nodded once, sharp and final. I'll leave in the morning. I'll call Susan, see if she can take me for a few weeks. Take months if you need them. Months, she repeated, like the word was foreign. Okay, months. She left the kitchen. I heard her climbing the stairs to the guest room, heard the door close softly. The tube of industrial glue sat on the table between her empty chair and mine, evidence of everything we'd become and everything we'd lost. I picked it up, walked to the trash can, threw it away. Some evidence needed to be preserved. Some needed to be buried. Margaret left 3 days later. I helped her load suitcases into the Honda, the same car where she'd hidden her affair, where Stan Mitchell had suffered the consequences, where our marriage had quietly died while I vacuumed and found what I wasn't supposed to find. She cried when she backed out of the driveway. I didn't. I'd done my crying weeks ago, alone in the garage, holding a tube of lubricant that revealed more than any confession ever could. The house felt different without her. Bigger, quieter, emptier in some ways, fuller in others. I fell into new routines: breakfast at 6, crossword by 7, garden work until lunch. I fixed the dripping faucet in the bathroom, organized the garage, replanted the roses that needed moving. Projects I'd been putting off for years suddenly seemed urgent, necessary. Ways to fill the silence that didn't involve ghosts or betrayal, or wondering if my wife was thinking about me in Portland. Stan Mitchell appeared on my porch on week 3. I was having evening coffee when I saw him through the window, standing on my steps like a defendant awaiting sentencing. I considered not answering. Considered letting him stand there until he gave up and went home to his empty house and his medical bills and his divorce papers. But curiosity won. I opened the door. He looked terrible. Lost weight. Gained shadows under his eyes. Moved carefully, like certain movements still hurt. Probably did. Industrial adhesive doesn't forgive easily. Neither do surgeons who have to separate bonded skin. William, he said, just my name. Same way Margaret had said it that day by the fence, loaded with confession and fear and respect. Stan. I didn't invite him in, didn't offer coffee or small talk or any of the neighborly courtesies we'd exchanged for 20 years before he started screwing my wife. I know what you did, he said quietly. The glue, the replacement. I know it was you. I waited. Let him fill the silence. Carol told me before she left. Said she met with you. Said you admitted everything. He shifted his weight, winced slightly. I could press charges. Assault. Reckless endangerment. My lawyer says we'd have a case. Your lawyer's probably right. I sipped my coffee. So why are you here instead of at the police station? Stan looked down at his shoes. Because I deserved it. What you did. The pain, the humiliation, the medical bills, all of it. I slept with your wife for 6 months and never once thought about what it would do to you or to Carol or to anyone except myself. So I deserved what happened. He looked up, met my eyes. But Margaret didn't. She's a good person who made a bad choice. Don't punish her forever for my mistakes too. I almost laughed. Almost. You think this is about punishment? Stan, this is about trust. About 42 years of marriage built on a foundation that crumbled the moment I found that tube under her seat. You want me to forgive her? Tell me how. Tell me how to look at her without seeing you. Tell me how to believe anything she says after 6 months of lies. Tell me how trust works when it's been shattered like your dignity in that hospital. He had no answer. Of course he didn't. There was no answer. Some questions don't have them. I'm sorry, he finally said. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I destroyed my marriage. Destroyed yours too, probably. Cost Carol 40 years. Cost you the same. All for 6 months of feeling something I thought I was missing. He stepped back off the porch. I won't press charges. You won't see me around much anymore. I'm selling the house, moving to Florida near my daughter. Fresh start. New life. All that bullshit people say when they're running from consequences. He walked back to his house. I watched him go. This man who'd been my neighbor for 2 decades, who'd helped me move furniture and borrowed my lawnmower and destroyed my marriage in the backseat of a Honda. I didn't feel satisfaction, didn't feel vindication, just felt tired, bone-deep tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. I'm reading and replying to every comment under this post. Tell me honestly, would you have done what I did? Margaret called that night, said she'd been thinking, said Portland was beautiful but lonely, said her sister asked about me, asked if we were getting divorced, asked questions Margaret didn't have answers to. I listened without interrupting, let her fill the silence the way Stan had. When she finally ran out of words, I spoke. I saw Stan today. He came to apologize. Silence on her end. Then, did you accept it? No. Apologies don't fix broken trust. They just acknowledge it's broken. More silence. I could hear her breathing, hear traffic in the background, hear her sister's TV playing in another room, heard her whole temporary life in Portland that existed because our permanent life here had fallen apart. "Do you want a divorce, William?" Her voice cracked on my name. I looked around our empty house, at her reading chair in the corner, at the photos on the mantle of us young and smiling and unbroken, at 42 years of accumulated life that didn't disappear just because trust did. "I don't know what I want anymore, except honesty. Can you give me that?" "Yes," she whispered. "I can try." "Then try. Stay in Portland. Think about why you did what you did, not the surface reasons, feeling alive, excitement, whatever bullshit you told yourself. The real reasons, the deep ones. And when you figure that out, call me. Maybe we'll talk about what comes next." "How long?" "However long it takes." She hung up. I sat in the dark with my cold coffee and empty house and the ghost of a marriage that might survive or might not. Couldn't tell yet. The ending hadn't been written. The final chapter was still blank, waiting for me to decide what words filled it. Stan's house went up for sale 2 weeks later. A young couple bought it, newlyweds with a baby on the way, and dreams that hadn't been broken yet. I watched them move in, full of hope and plans and trust in each other. Wondered if they'd last. Wondered if any of us really do. Margaret stayed in Portland. We talked once a week, careful conversations about nothing important. The weather, her sister's book club, my tomatoes. Surface talk that didn't cut deep enough to bleed. But slowly, gradually, the conversations got longer, got realer, got closer to the truth we'd been avoiding. 3 months after she left, she told me the real reason. Not feeling alive, not excitement. Fear. Fear of getting old. Fear of being invisible. Fear that 42 years had turned her into someone's wife instead of someone whole. Stan had made her feel seen. I'd made her feel safe. She'd chosen being seen over being safe and destroyed both in the process. "I don't know how to fix this," she said, crying on the phone at midnight. "I don't know how to be the person you trusted again." "Maybe you can't be," I said honestly. "Maybe that person's gone. But maybe there's a new person you could become, someone who learned from the worst mistake of her life, someone who chose truth over comfort, someone I could learn to trust again even if it's different than before." "Is that enough?" she whispered. "Different trust?" "I don't know," I said for the 1,000th time since finding that tube, "but maybe it's a start." She came home 6 months after she left. We didn't fall into each other's arms, didn't promise eternal love, didn't pretend the past could be erased. We just sat at the kitchen table with coffee and crossword puzzles and tried to figure out if two broken people could build something new from the pieces of what they'd destroyed. Some days were good. Some days I looked at her and still saw Stan Mitchell. Some days she looked at me and saw the man who'd replaced lubricant with industrial glue. But some days we just saw each other, two people who'd survived betrayal and revenge, and 6 months of silence, and were trying, desperately, imperfectly, to find their way back to something resembling love. The moral of my story isn't about revenge, it's about consequences, about how every choice carries weight, about how trust is spelled with 4 letters but takes a lifetime to build, and a moment to shatter, and another lifetime to rebuild, if you're lucky enough to get the chance. Margaret made a choice. I made a choice. Stan made a choice. We all paid prices. We're all still paying. But here's what I learned in that quiet year of crosswords and tomatoes and industrial glue. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be survived. And sometimes, surviving together is the bravest choice of all. If you've made it this far, I want to know, have you ever had to choose between revenge and forgiveness? Drop a comment and let me know. I'm here, reading everyone, because your stories matter just as much as mine. And if this story moved you, made you think, made you feel something real, hit that subscribe button. Because life is messy and complicated and full of tubes we shouldn't hide under seats, and we're all just trying to figure it out together.